Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go.
All right. Good morning. I'm sorry about that. I did not have myself on mute there. My bad. Appreciate it, man. My bad. My bad. I knew I was talking. But basically, and I'll reintroduce myself, man. Shout out to everybody. I apologize for putting myself on mute. But anyway, basically, like I said, today's lesson is going to be about proof, right? Because a lot of times, if you call yourself a Christian, Catholic, Jew, Muslim, Hebrew Israelite, whatever you want to identify yourself with, how you believe, right? I think sometimes as a believer, the issue comes in with, can you prove what this book says is true? And a lot of times you will do some things like some research. Sometimes you won't. You just read the Bible and you'll try to match it up and things like that. But I think one of the major issues that sometimes comes in is you can go on a Google search and they'll say there was no biblically there is no anthropological evidence of an Exodus, or they will say Moses is not real, Abraham is not real. So they will do all of these things to basically try to, in my opinion, kind of question your faith at times, right? So hopefully by the end of the day's show, you should feel, in my opinion, encouraged, because when I started putting all the dots together, and I'm going to show you like the same way that scholars would try to disprove it, then either the writers of the Bible are in a time period. Now you got to understand, I can use Google, I can use academic works, I can use a lot of different sources. But if I feel like there's some stories in the Bible that are unbelievable, and I think we would all agree on that, right? But if you're telling me that the writers of the Bible are the greatest plagiarists of all times, then to me, that's even a more incredible story than some of the things. That's more incredible than somebody being swallowed by a fish. That's more incredible than a guy killing, 10,000 men with a donkey's jawbone. You see what I'm saying? Like, the fact that they would have had to speak all of these different languages from all these other cultures that I'm going to go through, and then compile that into their own writing system, own books, make their own stories that are separate from all of that, I think that's even more ridiculous, right? So I'm not going to be long because I got a lot of material to go through. I shouldn't be longer than 45 minutes. Like, if you have questions or if you need me to slow down, I would say take out a pen or some notes, because this is going to be a lot. But once again, if you want to, you can just watch it again if you feel like you missed something. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start it. And I just want to, like I said, start getting into the information. So let me go ahead, because it was a pretty big file. So let me share my screen real quick. Do this right here. All right. And I also got my audio share. All right. So hopefully you can still see me. Once again, I got to do this from a separate view again. So you know what I am going to do? Let me see if I can move this real quick and make it smaller. So then that way what I'm sharing can be over here. Then that way I can still keep up with StreamYard just in case something happens. So I'm going to leave this over here. All right. So hopefully you can still see the screen and whatnot. So today's thing is why are scholars hiding the truth behind the Bible, right? An open discussion, I already kind of talked about it a little bit, but it's a believer versus a knower, and the difference is highly noticeable. Okay, when you know what you're talking about is one thing, but if you're just still in believer mode, I feel like when you know, then now you can move forth in confidence in what you believe in. So let me keep going. This is a personal study question, like I always like to do. What version of the Bible do you read, and are you a purist? I know some people who only deal with certain versions of the Bible. I just say, if that is your stance, I feel like if the message or whatever is being said changes that much from Bible to Bible, then that's problematic. And then also what we're going to talk about is going to be, what extra biblical evidence do you use or trust, if any? All right. So my main sources, the same ones I normally use for those that watch the channel. And for those that watch the channel a lot and you've seen some of my older videos, then some of this not going to be repetitive, but it'll kind of refresh as I kind of connect all of these dots. So let's keep going. All right. So the first question is, why do scholars lie? Number one, to encourage people to buy books, or to try to make themselves, to try to raise their level of status, right? Number two, to avoid disfranchising the ethnic identity of millions/billions of people worldwide. When scholars start doing this archaeology, and they start going back and they're looking at all these different things, then as they're starting to discover certain things, they do have agendas. And I'm not going to go on no conspiracy tip, but if you don't believe that archaeologists have agendas when they're doing all these sites with the funding, first of all, who's funding it and all these other things, you have to understand that first, okay? To support various political and economic agendas, right? Like, what I say is, if you don't believe the first, number one, or number two, then you have to ask yourself, where does the Bible take place, right? And we use the term the Middle East. We use the term the Levant. We use the term the Near East. We don't use terms like Northeast Africa or what would that be? Southwest Asia. It's because they wanted to take an entire region and basically separate it from everybody else on the planet. You understand what I'm saying? So that's the reason why we use terms like the Middle East, but we don't really stop and think about why do we do that? Why is, Germany, right? Like Germany is obviously a European country. Kenya is obviously an African country. But if you said Saudi Arabia, I don't necessarily know if people just instantly connect Saudi Arabia. Would they say it's Africa? Would they say it's Asia? I think most people would say an Asian country. But I think the more thing that you would probably identify with it would be it's in the Middle East, right? Number 4, to discourage people's beliefs who have spiritual beliefs because they are atheists. That's one of the biggest motivations of why scholars lie, because they know this information. Because if I was going through some of this information, I'm like, people have to know some of this stuff, and I don't understand why they're lying about this stuff, but I'm going to get into it. So let's keep going. All right, so this is just a scholarly discussion. I'm not going to hold this. This is just some of what scholars like to do, right? You got a big atheist out there named Bart Ehrman, and he likes to talk about the historical argument. On the bottom left, these are people who allegedly had some sort of testimony to Jesus existing. But these are just kind of some of the things that are in the scholarly. The one at the top right, some people like to say Egypt never had slaves. So people would point to something like that and say, oh, well, they did. But as we go along, I just want you to kind of it's going to be a lot, but I'm going to kind of go slow through it because I want you to get it, but I don't want to like drag it out. Like, I don't want this to feel like church. I want it to feel like school, but it is going to be learning, and there should be some moments, in my opinion, for celebration based on some confirmation that I got. So let's just keep going. So the Bible, real quick. The Bible was used as an infallible and accurate source of history until excavations of prior civilizations began to be discovered. All right, one of the major motivations of funding for Egyptology was confirmation of biblical narratives. So when you see these people doing all these site digs and things, and they're always, in that area, a lot of times is because they wanted to confirm some things that were in the Bible. So let's start off. First of all, we got to go back to Exodus, and what I want to explain from a biblical perspective and from a historical perspective, what is happening in this, and then the biblical narrative confirms history. So watch this. Exodus chapter 1, verse 7 through 10. All right. It says, and I'm reading from the Amplified Bible, so you can read along in your Bible, but it says, but the Israelites were prolific and increased greatly. They multiplied and became extremely strong, so that the land was filled with them. It says, now a new king arose over Egypt. Right now, one thing I will point out is it doesn't say he was Egyptian, right? It says, now a new king arose over Egypt, right? Versus the other time it calls them the king of Egypt. It doesn't necessarily do that until later, but I'll keep going. And it says, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of the sons of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, so that they will not multiply, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Okay. So verse 11 says, so they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with hard labor. And the sons of Israel built Pithom and Ramses as storage cities for Pharaoh. So right now, we're talking about the Hyksos, or in the meta-netta, the Hyksos, right? These are a group of Semitic people who came over, and that term is basically either shepherd king, shepherd captive, however you want to translate it. But I want you to look at the picture on the right. This is straight off the walls of Egypt of what they look like. They were shepherds. Look at the dress. Look at the fringes. I want you to notice some of the things that they're doing. So when you see some of these later slides, it's all going to start to tie together. Okay. And these are things you can easily go on Google and Google that they established Avaris as the capital. So if you zoom in, and it's another thing I don't think a lot of people realize, right here, this is Avaris. So if you don't know this, like Israel is like right over here. So when we talk about Egypt and Israel, we're not talking about countries that are very far away. I think somebody said it's like 150 miles away from each other. Let's keep going. So let me just do a little geography real quick. So once again, when you start to see some of these other things, it'll start to put everything together. So let's look. So if I zoom in on this map, right, you got Avaris up here, right? You got the whole Hyksos territory right here. You had a native Egyptian dynasty still right here that controlled Thebes. And then down below here, oops, sorry, you had the kingdom of Cush, right? So when we start having these conversations, I'm not going into the race or the color conversation as much, not even as much, but you need to understand the the kingdom of Cush is below at this point, right? So you have a Semitic dynasty on top, and then you have a Hamitic or an African dynasty on top, on the bottom, which is called Northern Egypt because they do it backwards, right? So Lower Egypt is to the north, and Upper Egypt is to the south. And then in between a Semitic and a Hamitic dynasty, right, or Hamitic kingdoms, right, of invasion to Egypt, you have in the middle this native Egyptian pharaoh right there. So I just want to kind of back out again so you can see what I'm talking about. All right. So let me keep going. So the Hyksos were defeated by Ahmose I and began the era of the 18th dynasty in 1550 BCE. This was the reunification of Upper and Lower Egypt, thus ending the second intermediate period. Now, if you notice things like the Europeans do it sometimes too, but the Egyptians do it a lot, right? When they have a time period of a foreign ruler, it normally enacts what is called an intermediate period. Okay, so if you're thinking about these different things, right? Oh, sorry, let me go back. So if you're thinking about these different things, right, then go back and look at the history of Egypt. Every single time there is a foreign ruler, right, they will talk. It normally starts or ends an intermediate period. And I'm going to get to the third one later. But once again, understand this period that we're talking about right now ended a point of foreign rule. And this is what they, I know somebody later on called it that, but this is what a lot of people go by. First, second, third intermediate period. Let's keep going. Manetho. So real quick, I'm going to bring up Manetho because I'm going to bring up something later on, and I really want some of these points to really start to hit home because I'm going to get back into the Bible in a second. Manetho, he was born during the Hellenized period of Egypt, right? So this was around, I think, the 3rd century BCE. He was an Egyptian priest and historian. He was believed to have lived in the early 3rd century. This is Ptolemaic Egypt. So if you know who the Ptolemies were, this is one of Alexander the Macedonians generals who he placed in different things. So you had like the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, and people like that. So if you go back and study Alexander the Greek, so now we are now outside of native Egyptians, Cushite Egyptians, Semitic rulers. So we have now gotten fully into a Macedonian pharaohs. This is where Cleopatra comes out. So I just want you to get it, right? He wrote the book Egyptica, right? Now, most scholars use his work to align the Egyptian succession of pharaohs. Now, the key is only fragments of his work survive because you can go on Google right now, and a lot of people use Manetho to establish, okay, when a pharaoh was this point, when was this point, but then you say, well, how do they use that? If you watched the show before, you know I like using Josephus. Josephus has a lot of Manetho's work in what he talks about because it's one of the few things that survive. So now let's keep going. Moses in the burning bush. So let's go to Exodus 4 verses 1 through 9. Okay. And it says, then Moses answered the Lord and said that if they will not believe me or take seriously what I say, for they may say the Lord has not appeared to you. And the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. Then he said, throw it on the ground. So Moses threw it on the ground and it became a living serpent. And then it says in quotation marks and amplified, like the royal symbol on the crown of Pharaoh. I'm going to come back to that. And it says, and Moses ran from it. It said, but the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and grasp it by the tail. It said, so he reached out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. And it said, so you shall do this so that the elders may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has certainly appeared to you. And then it says, the Lord also said to him, put your hand in your robe where it covers your chest. So he put his hand into his robe, and when he took it out, his hand was leprous, as white as snow. Verse 7. Then God said, put your hand back into your robe again. So he put his hand back into his robe, and then he took it out. It was restored and was like the rest of his body. If they will not believe you or pay attention to the evidence of the first sign, they may believe the evidence of the second sign. He said, but If they will not believe these two signs or pay attention to what you say, you are to take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water which you take out of the river will turn into blood on the dry ground. So I want to point out two things real quick in this verse right here. And if you saw my other show where I talked about these different things, right? I don't know if you've ever asked yourself a question, because I feel like, man, sometimes the Bible be coming with some more gems sometimes than I think we realize. But did you ever ask yourself a question? Why would God have instructed him, or why would these have been the symbols? Blood from the Nile, turn your staff into a snake. I'm going to get to that in a second. And why would he have possibly turned his skin leprous? Okay. So let's keep going, because what I want to do real quick is I want to stop sharing for 1 second, and I want to show you something, because we gotta, when you're studying, right, and you're really trying to get into the book, you've got to deal with the blue letter Bible, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again, so that way you can see what I'm talking about. So we've got to get into these different terms, man. Shout out to Dream With Us and Black Jesus Minister checking in, man. Shout out to y'all. Watch this. I want you to be able to understand, because as we move, I need you to really understand what I'm about to bring out. Remember the three. We'll call them signs. If you want to call them miracles, we'll call them signs right now. Snake, leprosy, and the water specifically, because if you notice what the book said, and I'm about to pull it up in the blue letter Bible so we can get into where they got all this, because we're reading it in the King's English. I'm not doing this in Hebrew, right? So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to share my screen again, right? And we need to get to the blue letter Bible, because we got to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So let me go right here to my blue letter study Bible, and let's get back to that, right? So we was in Exodus. That was chapter 4, right? So if you never used the blue letter Bible, like I said, it's very good for study, because it's going to let you know and take you to the original words if you want to. You can get into the Masoretic text if you want to. That's not my point. My point is, I want to go to the one part where it says, now it says you will take it out of the river, right? So once again, when you know, when they're in Egypt, they're talking about the river now. But what I want to focus on from my first point is where it says the serpent. All right. So right now the numbers are next to it. So let's see. Oh, sorry, I done went down too far. All right, here we go. All right. And there it is. So we got H5 175, right? And I want you to hear this, because remember, if you watch my other
Strong's
show,
H 5175. Nachash.
All right, so you have that term Nahash. I hope y'all can hear that, man. If you can hear that, man, just throw a 1 in the chat real quick. Let me know you can hear, because it's going to become important later. So it says that this was the term that was used when Moses was, dealing with the burning bush, and he was told the 3 signs. Okay, the term Nahash was used. Okay, so what the Amplified Bible says is the serpent was a symbol of Pharaoh. If you go look at a lot of the crowns of pharaohs, I'm not a Kemetic scholar, or whatever the case may be, but you do see a lot of them. I believe that is a cobra that is presented. So we have this term Nahash. Okay, so let's keep going. So let me stop sharing my screen real quick, because I just wanted to point that one little part out. Now, something that I'm about to say, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but I want to try to bring it together. And I'm not, either way you look at it, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to change your mind or anything like this, but this is just something that I'm going to try to make it make sense to me. So let's keep going. So let me get back to my slides again. All right. Because like I said, I don't know if what I'm about to talk about is something that you've heard before, but let's just see. Okay. So I always ask the question, why these 2 miracles? Or we could say 3, because I didn't put the blood on here. So let's talk about it. So you can Google it. I'm not going to do a Google break, because like I said, I still got a lot of information to get through. I think we're about halfway through, so it's not going to be that long, and I'll take questions at the end or whatnot. So let's just keep going. The staff was a crocodile, not a snake. Now, this is something that I would like to point out real quick, right? Because now you have to understand what was going on. Now, what I'm going to do is I need to pull up in the Strongs when they go before Pharaoh, right? It's not the Nahash that is used, it's the word Tayin. And the word Tayin is a word that can mean a river monster, okay? And the etymology root of that is going to be the H8565, which is tan, right? So I know y'all are like, wait, no, I thought it was a serpent. It says serpent, it says snake. In my opinion, based on this part, and I'll get to it in a second, I believe the staff turned into a crocodile, and I want to read from the Blue Letter Bible. So now that I kind of threw something out here that you might, I don't know if you ever heard that before, but I'm going to explain to you why I believe it wasn't necessarily a serpent, but in this case, because once again, we already had the term for serpent that he used in the wilderness, but it was a different Hebrew word that was used once he got before Pharaoh. So let me stop sharing real quick, and let's see here. Let me get back to my Blue Letter Bible. Okay. Appreciate it. Appreciate that, Bishop, man. Let me know that you can hear me out there. All right, so I want to get back to the Blue Letter Bible because I want to bring this out. And if you never heard this before, man, just let me know. Once again, don't think I'm crazy. I'm just going to show you my logic and reason behind it, because if you don't understand the Blue Letter Bible, if you don't understand how these things were translated, this is the source. They use the Hebrew words in the Old Testament. They use the Greek words in the New Testament to be able to translate it. This is how this was like the philosophy behind how they translated. So let me go to back to my Blue Letter Bible again, and I want you to see something. So this time I'm going to go here. And remember how I showed you it was a term Nahas, right? So remember, if you didn't remember, I'll play it one more time just so you can see it's a different word.
Strong's H 5175. Nachash. Nachash.
All right, so like I said, hopefully everybody can hear that. Now I want to type in the word serpent, right? So let's keep going. So now I want to scroll down to where we get to Exodus 7 and 10, right? So let me click on my Strongs. Okay, now it's H8577. Now listen to this.
Strong's H 8577. Tanim. Tanim.
All right, so we had Nahash, and now we have Tanin. And now look at in the key in the translation, look at what it also could mean: a dragon, a whale, a sea monster, also a serpent. But the outline of biblical is a sea or a river monster, a serpent, a dragon, or a sea monster. And then I'm gonna tie everything together why I think it was a crocodile. So everybody should be able to see that we have two different words, the same rod that's being cast down, but we have two different words. One time it said serpent, this time it's still saying serpent as it's translated, but we have two different Hebrew words. So this becomes a very simple thing, right? So watch this. Let me stop sharing and let me come back one more time and let me reshare my screen, so then this way you can hear this, because to me this would make it a lot easier. Let me see here. I'm gonna go to Google Translate, right? And if I go to Google Translate, you should be able to see what we're talking about. It's very simple, right? So let me go to Google Translate so you can hear it again. Now remember, we had Nahash, which meant snake, and then we had Tayin, which meant crocodile. So let's just type in English snake, and let's see what it sounds like.
Nahash.
We got Nahash, okay? So let's try serpent, all right? Okay, now let's see what that sounds like.
Nahash.
All right, now let's type in crocodile.
Tanin.
See what I'm saying? It's the same one that's used when they went before Pharaoh, right?
Tanin.
It says Tanin. It's not Nahash anymore. And if we go back to the Strongs, I don't know if you can see the next string that I got up, but once again, the 85 Strong's H8577. All right. So that is my logic behind saying, well, now we didn't have a snake fight on there, because let me go back to the verse real quick, and I want to show you something, because it does kind of say like now check this part out. So it says let me go to Exodus 7:10, and I just want to read a little bit. I'm not going to read too much because, like I said, I got a lot to go over. So it says basically, so Pharaoh called the wise men. This is Exodus 7, verse 11. Then Pharaoh also called the wise men, the sorcerers, now the magicians of Egypt. They also did in a like manner with their enchantments, for they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. It says, but Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. Okay. So if you think about that, like, I know some people who have seen now going back on it, that terrible Anaconda movie and things like that. And we're talking about a snake that in Egypt, if you look up Egyptian cobra, it's not the king cobra, but even if it was, it wouldn't matter. We're not talking about no boa constrictor like animal or something like that. So the reason why I believe that it was a crocodile is what I'm about to get to right now when I go back and share my screen. But I just want to show you that difference between the Hebrew word nahash and the word between the Hebrew word tanin, right? Because now that's a totally different scene if he putting down the rod and we got a crocodile battle in Pharaoh's throne room. You understand what I'm saying? That's a totally different scene right there. So let me go back to my slides real quick, because I'm gonna not wrap things up, but you'll be able to kind of get where I'm going with this, right? So I've explained this, right? So I believe it was a crocodile. Let's go. So now when Moses goes before Pharaoh, okay? So I was just talking about this. So remember when Moses went before Pharaoh. Now in Egypt, they worship a god called Sobek Ra, who is a crocodile god, okay? So what you have to understand is what was going on in Moses. I'm sorry, not in Moses, but let's first turn to Exodus 1:22, because I want to point this out. And I want you to see if you can understand where I'm going with this. Okay. It says, Exodus 1:22 says, then Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born to the Hebrews must be thrown into the Nile, but every daughter you shall keep alive. Okay. Think about that. Like, let that sit. So this is the reason what was going on while Moses was born. They were throwing all the Hebrew babies into the Nile River. Okay. Now, you can start to say amen in the chat if you start to understand where I'm about to go with this. But let's check out what happened in let's go to Exodus 7. And this is right after he swallowed the serpents, right? It says the water is turned to blood. It said, then, verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out of the water, and wait for him on the banks of the Nile. He said, you shall take in your hand the staff that was turned into a serpent, or in this case, a crocodile. You will say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent to you, saying, let my people go, so that he may serve me in the wilderness. But behold, you have not listened until now. Thus says the Lord, by this you shall know and recognize and acknowledge that I am the Lord. Look, with this staff in my hand, I will strike the water in the Nile, and it shall be turned into blood. It said the fish in the Nile will die, and the Nile will become foul, and the Egyptians will not be able to drink the water. And then it said he did this. So now let's kind of tie everything together. I'm telling you it's a crocodile, right? I'm telling you the Bible says that he turned the Nile River into blood. I just brought out Exodus 1:22, where it says that that's where you was throwing the Hebrew babies. So if you was throwing Hebrew babies into crocodile infested waters, and then you are turning the Nile into blood, then to me it's like God is showing him, like, we ain't forgot about them babies that you killed. You understand what I'm saying? Like, this is what, some of the Kemetic people call ma'at. So later on, when it happens to the firstborn of Egypt, this is that balancing that they talk about when they talk about the principle of ma'at. Somebody has to pay for them babies that were being thrown in a crocodile infested river. I think it's very somewhat ironic if you Google the term alligator bait, that something like that kind of happened to people in America. But just kind of let that sit in for a second, right? A rod that turned into an alligator. You know the alligators are in the Nile. You knew that's where you threw the babies out, right? And then now he done basically turned the water into blood, right? Let's keep going. So I want to talk about first the Ipuwer Papyrus, right? Or the papyrus leading 344. So now I'm going to get into some receipts. Now, let me go ahead and preface this by saying this isn't like the nail in the coffin. Okay, this talks about plagues, because the guy who wrote it is considered a poet. So once he's known as a poet, then you can kind of get out of it saying, oh, he didn't mean it literally. He was speaking in a manner to basically make some things be more poetic or sound good. But if you look up this papyrus, this is what some Christians and some biblical scholars have tried to use to basically say that he was talking about the plagues. It talks about Egypt being dark. It talks about people being in mourning because of all the death that was going around. It talks about the river turned into blood, but people will say, oh no, that's just from the silt accumulate. They will try to figure out a way to not make this real. I'm not going to go over everything, but this papyrus, you can Google it. I'm going to leave it up for a second so you can look at it. But it doesn't necessarily talk about frogs and locusts and all that other stuff, right? But once again, it does talk about something, and it does fit the time period that we're talking about. Let's keep going. The Amarna letters, right? The Amarna letters. This was written between 1353 and 1336 BCE, okay? This was a correspondence between Egypt and their vassal states. All right. These Canaanite vassals mention attacks from the Habiru. I'm not going to say just because it sounds like Hebrew, that's who they're talking about. But what I want you to do is look at where all, wait, hold on. Let me go back. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Look at where all these letters are coming from, y'all. You see, if you can't, I'm trying to zoom in without clicking on it. Hold on. Let me zoom in. Hold on. There you go. All right, let me zoom in. Look at where all these letters are coming from. And they're complaining about getting attacked, right? So now what we got to do is look at all of these letters complaining. I'm not saying every single letter is complaining, because there are certain correspondents that do it. But when you get time on your own, you can go look at some of these Amarna letters, right? And I'm going to show you a timeline later on, but you got to see if this corresponds to what will be going on right now. And I got to get to some dates real quick, because that's what a lot of people say. We don't want to deal with dates. A lot of people like to say the historical Exodus, if it happened, it would have happened in 1446, right? So we're about 100 years outside of that. So now we're talking about the period in the Bible of the Judges, okay? So I just want you to be able to understand where we're at. King Tut's tomb, right? 1341 and 1323 BCE. I want you to look at these people, right? Not because I'm trying to make an overarching point, but I need you to understand what's going on, because everybody, sometimes like I said in my podcast on Thursday, you fall in love with Egypt, you fall in love with Kemet, but you don't understand what you're looking at. Okay? This is King Tut's tomb, and I brought this up the other day. He had canes and he had sandals, right? Made with his enemies on it. So, black people, all the people rocking with Kemet, man, what are we talking about here? They're identifying other people that they don't like, and they're also black. You understand? Now, some people said this was made out of ivory, so this is, I guess, a white person. Now, if you want to believe that, you can. I'm not going to say that's a white person, but look at his sandals, y'all. He's walking like this is some gangster stuff. I ain't gonna lie. Even though King Tut only lived to be 19, this is gangster. I ain't gonna care what nobody say. Every time he took a step, he's walking on his enemies. Now, what I want you to realize is, remember that pattern that I told you to look when we saw the Hyksos earlier? You see the fringed material right here. You see the fringed material over here. Look at these Africans. You see the different phenotype that you see. You see the one over here with the feather. This is identifying who were the enemies of Egypt. And we're talking about less than 100 years outside of the Exodus. Let's keep going. The merneptah stele, right? This is fair. It's about Pharaoh Merneptah, who reigned from 1213 to 1203 BCE. Now, some people believe, now this is just not something that you hold your hat on, but this is also called the Israel stele. So what I put at the bottom is This is what it allegedly is translated. I don't speak the meta, so I'm trying to get somebody on who does, and he can verify some of this stuff, but let me keep going. Devastated is Libya. The Hittites are quiet. Canaan, Israel is laid waste without seed. Palestine, blah, 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 blah. So the part that they believe is Israel is, I believe, is this part right here, where it has something called like YS, I don't know if that's an ER or however they want to do that, but it basically said like Israel waste seed or Israel is laid waste. Then over here, I have the Paleo Hebrew, which is what Israel was actually called, because if you go just in the basic, they don't call it Israel, they put the Y in front of it, so it's Yisrael. But if you go back to this time period, it would have been called like Yasharal or Yasharallah. Okay, let's keep going. The 25th dynasty, aka the Nubian pharaohs, right? So this is 744 BCE to 656. Now remember, I told you before, right? This is during what they call the third intermediate period. Let me tell you why. Because now the Nubians, some people, I ain't gonna name no names, but you've heard people try to make it seem like, oh, Egypt, Kemet, the Nubians, oh, it's Kush, it's all the same thing. No, it's not. Because even the best Egyptologists will say this is why this happened during the second intermediate period. Why is it called the second intermediate period? What did I explain to you earlier? Every time Egypt has foreign rulers, right, they call it an intermediate period. We saw it with the Hyksos. It was another intermediate period. I don't think that's supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be third intermediate period. I might be wrong, but it's one of the intermediate periods starting where they say the pharaohs begin, and now these pharaohs have Libyan descent. So when you say African, you need to be very specific, because the people on this screen don't look exactly like them other pharaohs that you might see, right? So then I said, remember Nubia, Egypt, and Kush from my other one, right? Look at these people. These are different phenotypes of people. I don't know what y'all are looking at when you see these people, but these ain't us. You understand what I'm saying? So you got to be able to identify. Some people are African. So if you look at some of the phenotypes that are on the screen, I think they match more closely to what some of the Egyptians put on the wall. But once again, that's just how I'm looking at it. Let's keep going. So let's just get this timeline from the Exodus real quick. So the Exodus is believed to happen in 1446 BCE. All right. The time of Joshua or the Judges was from 1400 to 1050 BCE. Okay, now if you remember when I showed you that one stele that talked about the Amarna letters, when did that allegedly happen? That would have been going on during the time of the Judges. So we're talking about Gideon, Deborah, and Barak, all of those people, right? King Solomon's temple, they placed at 959 BCE. If you want some more confirmation of that, you can Google the Kings of Tyre, Tyre, or you can look up the Pharaoh who would have, I believe, been during, this is the Libyan Pharaoh, right? So another thing that's kind of convenient is when these sometimes major events happen in the Bible or with Israel, Egypt is in an intermediate period, meaning there's somebody else that's there, okay? And then King Josiah and Pharaoh Necho, and that was in 609 BCE. And the reason why I like bringing up Pharaoh Necho, because it's one of the few pharaohs in the Bible that's actually named by name. And if you go to, I believe it's in 2nd Chronicles, right? Pharaoh Necho basically tells Josiah, hey, look, this fight ain't even for me. You know, like, I don't have no beef with you. I'm trying to go handle somebody else. But they kind of sort of get into it. But I just want you to be able to develop just a timeline for what we're talking about. And all of these things match up. If you go look at the time period of Josiah, Pharaoh Necho II, you can Google him right now. Pharaoh Necho II, I think he takes reign in 610. It matches up. If you go look at King Solomon's temple and you look at Shoshank I, and who in the Bible is identified as, I believe, it's Shashak, which is where, can't remember if it's Rehoboam or Jeroboam. I think it's Jeroboam. Jeroboam went to Emperor Shashak for a little bit, right? So once again, it's matching, okay? Against Apion, right? Josephus writes a defense to criticism received by a Hellenized Egyptian named Apion Pleistonesus, and it says many historians use Josephus's chronology to establish Egyptian succession of pharaohs because Joseph is quoting Manetho. The reason why I bring up Josephus in this book is because I need you to understand. I'm using the same guy that Egyptologists use, that all of the people in the conscious, the Kemetic community, all these however you want to call them, right? They're all using Manetho, but they're getting it from Josephus most of the time, right? So when it comes to trying to figure out whether or not the Bible is real, then I'm like, well, I don't need to worry about not necessarily the Bible is real, but can we connect some of the dots, right? So check this out. I'm going to do the same thing that everybody else does, because nobody is saying, well, this guy isn't real, even though that Egyptian history gets real shaky at times. And they're just saying best guess, best guess, best guess. But the thing is, because we're not dealing with the Bible and we're not dealing with these type of sources, right? Then people say, oh, that Bible, that's just a book of fairy tales. So you know what? If they're going to say Egypt is real and the Bible is fake, I think the best or the smartest thing to do is I'm just going to go get it from them. So watch this. I'm going to talk about a guy called, I don't know if you ever heard this before, who is Osar Seth, right? And it said, this story depicts a renegade Egyptian priest who leads an army of lepers against a pharaoh named Amenopus. And then there is a huge discrepancy in the story. Now, I want you to hear this story, y'all, because I'm going to pull it up for you real quick. And I'm going to share my screen. I'm not going to read all of it because it's a lot. When you get time, right? When you get time on your own, you can go back. But now I'm going to tie it together because I already showed you, right? The crocodile, right? I already showed you the, and you know, you can put a one in the chat when you understand where I'm going with this, right? Because if y'all want to set the standard with Egypt, I don't have no problem with that. I'll set the standard with Egypt too. Okay. So I already explained the three, right? I already told you about my thoughts with the crocodile, right? I already explained to you the blood, right? The Hebrew babies that was cast in there, right? Putting down a staff that would go into the water. Not like that. You understand what I'm saying? If the rod turned to a crocodile, now you touching them because you know them crocodiles. I mean, you can watch National Geographic. Y'all know what was going on, right? So check this out. Let me keep going a little bit further. Now I got to tie in the final nail in the coffin. So anybody who want to tell you that what we believe in is not true, that what we is not believe in, then you need to tell them pyramids got built in 1975 and whatever other stuff that they want to have a conversation about, right? Because I'm about to go ahead, like I said, I'm about to go ahead and put this nail in right now. And when you see where I'm about to go with this, right? Because let me explain something else too, right? And some people will disagree with me, and it's no disrespect to Moses, no disrespect how you believe. I believe that parts, not all of it, but parts of the Levitical law, the same law that Jesus said he followed. The reason why you say he was without sin is because he followed the law of Moses. I believe, right? Now I'm going to believe. Now we got to my opinion. But once again, I'm going to try to show you how my opinion, I'm going to try to prove it to the best of my ability. But check this out. I believe certain parts of the Levitical law was a method of separation, right? And what I mean by method of separation is look at where Israel went, right? Jacob, they went down into Egypt for however amount of time. I'm not here to debate the amount of time they were in Egypt. They went down into Egypt. They were dealing with Egypt. Moses grew up amongst the house of Pharaoh. So when people say Moses or the Bible, it's influenced by Egypt. We can't get around that, right? Just because it's influenced doesn't mean it's plagiarism, doesn't mean it's copyrighted. It doesn't mean that what we're talking about isn't real. But when you start to see what they're going to say, what an Egyptian is going to say, an Egyptian historian is going to say, it's going to start to bring everything kind of together. And I want you to be able to understand where I'm about to go with this, but I'm just going to read it to you real quick. And I want you to watch this. Now, this part is, like I said, this is the final nail in the coffin for anybody who wants to tell you this book ain't real, because they know they deal with Manetho too. So you can't use somebody when it's convenient for your point and then not allow us to do the same thing. So check this out, right? All right, so I'm gonna keep it right here, but if you look up here at the top, this is the University of Chicago. This is against Apion. This is the part of Josephus. Now, I'm just going to start reading certain parts that I want to kind of point out, right? Now, it says, now what part do I want to start with? First of all, remember what was the capital of the Hyksos Empire? Remember how I told you Avaris? So let's start right here where that 23 is. it says he also promised that he would in the first place bring them back to their ancient city and country of ours and provide a plentiful maintenance for their multitude, that he would protect them and fight for them, and occasion should require, and would easily reduce the country under their dominion. These shepherds were all very glad of this message and came away with alacrity altogether, being in number 200,000 men. In a little time they came to Avaris. And now Amenophis, the king of Egypt, upon his being informed of their invasion, was in great confusion, and calling to mind what Amenophis, the son of Poppy, said, had foretold him. And in the first place, he assembled the multitude of Egyptians and took counsel, right? So we've already established that Avaris is where they're kind of setting everything up. I already showed you with the Hyksos, this was the capital of another Semitic group. Now, this is the part that I want you to pay attention to, right? All right. So it says, where are we going? So here we go down here. Now I want to read this part. It says, but for the people of Jerusalem, when they came down together with the polluted Egyptians, remember that term, polluted Egyptians. I'm going to go back and explain that. They treated the men in such a barbarous manner that those who saw how they subdued the aforementioned country and the horrid wickedness they were guilty of thought it a most dreadful thing. For they did not only set the cities and villages on fire, but they were not satisfied till they had been guilty of sacrilege and destroyed the images of the God and used them and roasted those sacred animals. Once again, beef is something that you Israelites would eat, but in Egypt, some people say that the ancient Egyptians were vegetarians, but the cow we know was sacred in ancient Egypt. But if you know in the Levitical law, you can eat beef, right? It says those sacred animals that used to be worshipped, I believe that's Hathor, right? And forced the priests and prophets to be the executioner and murderers of those animals, and then ejected them naked out of the country. It says, it was also reported that the priests who ordained their polity and their laws was by birth of Heliopolis. His name was Osarsif, from Osiris, who was the god of Heliopolis. But when he had gone over to these people, his name was changed and he was called Moses. What are we talking about at this point? This is an Egyptian source, the same source that y'all use to give us the whole entire lineage of Egypt. And they're telling you right now what happened. But I got to tie in the last part. And I want you to see this part right up here. Because remember, it called them what? It called them polluted people. Okay. So where am I at? I got to find this real quick. And because basically what I want to show you is, and let me see. Where is this at? Sorry about this. Because I wanted to get this one part out. Now, it says, now, it was because another king before him had already seen them. It said he had then been informed what sort of gods they were and after what manner they had been seen, insomuch that he did not stand in need of a new artifice of attaining his sight. He said, however, the prophet by whose means the king thought to compass his design was a wise man. If so, how he came not, if so, how came he not to know that such his desire was impossible to be accomplished? For the event did not succeed, and what pretense could there be to suppose that the gods would not be seen by reason? For the gods are not angry at the imperfection of bodies, but at wicked practices. And as to 80,000 lepers, okay, 80,000. This is what Manetho was saying, right? Because they talked about a polluted thing. I'm trying to find it where basically he says, hold on. Okay, here it is right here. Manetho asked how this namesake of him told him that he might see the gods if he would clear the whole country of the lepers and of the other impure people. Ladies and gentlemen, who are these lepers they're referring to, and who are these impure people, right? So it also says, he says farther that there were some of the learned priests that were polluted with leprosy also. So now if we put all of that stuff together, right, historically, they're telling us that this is what he's saying, even though Josephus says he disagrees with it, right? So there was a rogue priest who basically led a band of lepers in a war in the former place where we know Jacob and his family went when they came down into Egypt, right? And then now we gotta tie it all together, right? Because what does it say Moses did in let's see here. I want to go to the book of Exodus, and then I'm gonna pretty much be done here. But this is the part right here that I think it's now starting to make sense. And it's let's see. So here we go. Exodus chapter 4, right? I'm gonna start at verse 29. Now I'm gonna put it all together, right? It says, then Moses and Aaron went into Egypt and assembled all the elders of the Israelites. And Aaron said all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses. Then Moses performed the signs that were given to him by God before the people. So the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord was concerned about the Israelites and that he had looked with compassion on their suffering, they then bowed their heads and worshiped the Lord. Now, remember I told you, I explained the crocodile. Now we're talking about, well, why did his hand turn leprous? If we believe what Manetho says, right? Because another part that the Bible says in the book of Exodus is it says they came out as a mixed multitude, meaning it wasn't just Israel with them. So even if we go with Manetho's account and he was leading a lot of lepers out of Egypt, then a man, if you're 70,000 people in Egypt are stricken with leprosy, and you have this man standing in front of you who's turning his hand from white back to its original color, I think that will be a very powerful thing. So right now, Manetho is, in my opinion, confirming the Exodus. He's confirming the Exodus, in my opinion, right? So I've got a couple of other slides that I want to do, but I'm pretty much done. But I need you to understand, like, that now is like, wow. So you telling me God made his hand turn leprous because he was leading some of the Egyptians up out of there? Because if you go into the Bible, right, and even if you go into the Levitical law, that's why there are laws for the Egyptian. What does it say? I believe in the third can become part of the congregation, things like that, right? So they even had that. There was a person in I believe it's either in Exodus or Numbers, I can't remember which one, but she was called an Israelitish woman because she had an Egyptian father. So some people who don't believe that the Israelites and the Egyptians and some of those people that was left over by the Hyksos, they had to have been mixing. So you got to get that out your head, right? That's what was going on. But now let me go ahead and like I said, I got a couple more slides to present, and then I'm going to be done. And like I said, if you got any questions, man, or if you want to ask me anything, we can do that because I'm almost done. I know I'm running close to an hour, which is long for one of my shows, but I just wanted to show you a couple of other things, right? So let's go back to our receipts real quick. I'm just going to speed through these. So we got the Ipuwer Papyrus, or called the Papyrus Leiden, number 344. We got the Amarna letters where they were complaining. Some of the Canaanite vassals were complaining about attacks from the Habiru, which match the times of the judges, right? You got King Tut's tomb where he's identifying Africans and Semitic people as his enemies, okay? You got the merneptah stele, which allegedly uses the term Israel. That would have been in 1213. So honestly, it's something that you can have a conversation about, but you got to remember that Israel does not become a nation, in my opinion, until Israel is unified under King Saul. And I believe on one of my slides, it will show 1050 for that date. Yeah. So if you look on here, it says the kings of the United Kingdom. It's got Saul 1050 to 1010. So that's what I'm going to go with, right? So I've already given you the receipts biblically, right? I mean, of the chronological order of what we're talking about. You got King Solomon's temple. Go back and look at the time of Hiram I, Shoshank. You got King Josiah, Pharaoh Necho the second. All right. So I already talked about that. The last part that I want to talk about real quick is the conflict in this is another thing that I need you to understand what I'm about to say real quick. I'm going to read the verses first so you understand what I'm talking about. And when I talk about the conflict, because once again, when they start talking about things they don't want us to know, or they want to keep us ignorant or stupid, I just want to show you something from the Bible real quick. In Genesis 23, verse 19, it says, after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Okay, now in the book of Acts, chapter 7, right, verses 15 and 16, we get something a little different. And it says, what I say, 15 and 16, right? It says, and Jacob, Israel, went down into Egypt, and there he died, as did our fathers. And from Egypt their bodies were taken back to Shechem and placed in the tomb which Abraham had purchased for a sum of money from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. So what I put up here is Hebron, okay, on the map, right? And now I'm just going to stop sharing because I'm pretty much done right now. But I just want to show you something on Google Maps real quick. And this is something that you need to understand, right? Hebron, right? This is Hebron. This is Google Maps. Hebron is a Palestinian city in the southern West Bank, 30 kilometers south of Jerusalem, nestled in the Judean mountains, okay? Now, in Hebron, they have this right here. All right, so it's going to pull it up. Oh, shoot, I'm not sharing my screen. My bad. Let me share this real quick. And then, like I said, I've already got through all my slides. So like I said, if anybody has any questions, I'm pretty much at the end. I just want to just go ahead and finish this up. But I just want to show you one quick thing real quick, right? Because this is a discrepancy. Now, if you look at Hebron, right? Because remember, we got a description of it in Genesis 23. It says, after this, Abraham was buried, his wife Sarah, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, in a field to the east of Mamre, which is Hebron, right, in the land of Canaan, right? So right here, this is called the Ibrahimi Mosque, and it says it's an ancient holy site where Abraham and other biblical figures are said to have been entombed. Now, let's see if we can match it up a little bit here. So, we got Kirjath Arba, right? Let's see if that's mentioned. So, if you go into, let me see. I think it mentions that. So, it says Sarah died in Kirjath Arba. This is Genesis 23, verse 2. Now, Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron. So right here, Kirjath Arba, Hebron, right? Verse, let's see, what else do we got? It says Machpelah, right? Let's see if we can find Machpelah on the map. So if I type in Machpelah, let's see if it's in this general area. Machpelah. It zoomed in even further, right? So when you start looking at this conflict, now let me go with what it says in Acts. It says they were buried in Shechem. Shechem's not where it says in the book they were buried. Now let's just see how far is Shechem from Hebron. So there's no way you could confuse that because one is on the completely other side of the place. But you're going to have to ask yourself why this is not correct. I'm not trying to go into that tonight, but what I would like you to understand is, just once again, let me just show you this right here. Who controls Hebron? The Palestinian National Authority. All right. So once again, not trying to go conspiracy theory, not saying this is why any of this stuff is happening, but what I'm saying is where they claim to have the what do they call them? The patriarchs buried is located in what we consider Palestinian territory. So you can take that with you. I really hope that this message that I brought today was informative. I really hope that, in my opinion, tying the blood, the river of the waters turning to blood, the staff turned into a crocodile, not a snake. The reason why potentially his hand turned to leprous, so then that way he could go to those Egyptians who have basically been cast out of their society, basically saying that's the reason why a lot of times people go to Hebrew Israelites. I ain't even trying to talk about them, but they do use the term Most High. So when they use that term, the Most High, the Alayan, what they're trying to say is we had to show Egypt our God is above Asar. Our God is above all of that because look at what he can do. and how people talk about him. You understand? He's not just a God of deliverance, but he's also a God of healing as well. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that should be a powerful thing to kind of take with you into 2024. Not saying you have to believe everything I said, because you can go back through it and you can check it out for yourself. But what I'm saying is, I don't know why they're lying, because I ain't gonna front, man. When I was in college, and I'm just gonna, like I said, be brief, I wasn't really concerned about the Bible. I sang in the choir. I wasn't really concerned about church. I would be there. I see people running around acting crazy. I'm just like, yeah, okay. I don't know what spirit they feeling. I don't feel nothing, right? You know, that's how I was, right? But since I've been on this journey now for about a year, I'm like, ain't no telling what I'm gonna be discovering and finding out, and especially once I put boots on the ground over there in Egypt. Well, they're gonna have to chill out in Israel first. I ain't going over there, but in Egypt, and I start going these places trying to connect some more dots, right? I ain't gonna say I'm gonna learn how to read the merneptah or hieroglyphics, because it's honestly, I'll take somebody who already knows how to do it, right? But this is what I've been able to kind of sort of find out in a year. So the only thing I have for y'all, man, if you're not in a church, if you didn't know some of the things I brought out today, if this has never been taught to you, like I said, if you can just do me a favor so this gets within the algorithm, you ain't hit that like button, if you ain't hit no comment, if you're not shouting around your house right now, I don't know what else can do it. Basically confirming that one of the most important figures in the Bible is confirmed as being real, not just because the book says so, but because history says so, and because the historian who all the Egyptologists want to use as a source says, and even went as far to say he changed his name to Moses. So I'm on, now that I'm back and I can see everything, if anybody has any questions real quick, I'm gonna just kind of talk for about I ain't gonna really talk that much. If you do got questions, you can put them in the chat if you want me to try to answer something, or if you feel I wasn't clear on anything. But all I can say, man, is I really hope that this lesson was a blessing to y'all, because when I saw it, it was a blessing to me. Now, let me be unlike most other people on YouTube, and let me give credit where credit is due. I didn't discover all of this on my own, okay? I would say there's a fair share of it that I did discover, but I have to give credit to a brother by the name of Zion Lex, who did a lesson on it as well. I brought out some other things that he did not, but I'm not gonna lie, the crocodile thing, I was like, yo, this brother's crazy. Then I went back and looked at it. I said, oh shoot, he was the one telling me about the babies being thrown. So shout out to Zion Lex. I'm not gonna try to take credit for your work, brother. That brother is way more studied and scholarly than I am. I can't speak about his doctrine or whatever he is, because like I don't like to endorse people, because I always tell you, even though I call myself a Hebrew, I don't associate with them crazy dudes that be yelling at white folks in the street. I don't do that. You understand what I'm saying? I come on here, I'm about the truth, and I'm about trying to make people better people, right? And I had this video that you might have saw if you watched my last show, but this is by a guy named Brother Jabari Osaze, and he said something to me, which, like I said, if you're a Christian, Islam, you Kemetic, you're an atheist, I honestly don't care. This is what I'm concerned about at the end of the day. And then at this, I'm going to end the show.
Regardless of what we talk about here, if your tradition is not making you a better person, if your tradition is not assisting you with developing better character, if your tradition is not helping you understand how you should interact with your brothers, then you should find a new tradition.
And I ain't just put him up there because he's an alpha too, but shout out to the frat though. Y'all know what time it is, man. Y'all know who the greatest and coldest out there is. But I ain't trying to get into none of that stuff either. But once again, that is how I believe. If whatever you believe in, if you're a Christian and it's not making you a better individual, if you're not interacting with human beings in a more positive nature, and when I say human beings, right, because I deal with science. So scientifically, if they're going to say we're all Homo sapien sapien, y'all got to get some of this other nonsense out your brain, right? So if whatever you're practicing, believing in is not making you a better human being at the end of the day, then like he said, you need to find a new tradition. Man, I really hope y'all are blessed by this, man. I want to say Shabbat Shalom to everybody out there. I'm not going to say anything regarding that, regarding Monday, because, that ain't biblical. So I don't rock with it. You understand what I'm saying? But enjoy the time with your family, because I know that's what a lot of y'all are going to be doing. We coming into a new year. Let's try to make 2024 way better than we did in 2023. I might take a week. I'm probably gonna take a week off until the new year, but I will be back to do some certain things, and I will be bringing on some guests. If you want to get in contact with me, man, you can write me at the Kung Fu Hebrew at yahoo.com. Pretty much spelled the way it's supposed to be spelled, but that's the Kung Fu Hebrew at yahoo.com. And man, until next time, man, y'all be blessed.